Meet Wallace Simpson and begin our descent into Hitler-loving fascist madness in part 2 of the theoretical body count of Edward VIII. Hello, and welcome to Body Count, the podcast that examines death and disaster through the ages because history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. I'm your host, Jessica Manor, and my amazing co-hostess with all the TNA today is...
Well, hello, everybody. It is Bethany Skelton. Woo!
I am so glad you're here.
Dude, I am feeling pumped. I really enjoyed last week's episode. I felt like I've learned so much, and I'm so excited to just get back into it.
And guys, we have been theorizing and talking about, we don't have proof, but this has been so forefront in our minds for a week. You have no idea. We've gone down some real rabbit holes with this one. But first, let's do our prep. So understand, we're in our pajamas, shooting the proverbial shit on the couch, and just trying to get through it all with a smile on our face and a spring in our step. Because we have, no, I can say this about Bethany too. I know it for a fact. Soul-crushing anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. Crippling even.
Yeah, crippling, definitely.
Ugh.
And laughing at the world and ourselves is about the only way we can cope, as we barely ever even leave our house. So in this 24-hour news cycle, we just don't have time to process an event anymore before they rip the next Band-Aid off and hit us with the next body count. We're here to slow it down, examine events that shape the world we live in, and hopefully correlate them with current events that you all and us too have, 10 seconds to process these days. Now, I'm only going to give this warning a couple more times. I know I've said that 3 times, but I'm really starting to mean it. Last time I give this warning is the 3rd episode of Edward. After that, it's on you. We plan to do all of this while making inappropriate jokes and not taking ourselves too seriously. If you're looking for that, like Hoover-esque, just the facts, ma'am, kind of history podcast or true crime project, that is not us. We're here having fun, but we're also going to learn something. So hopefully, Bethany, that saves us a little bit of internet hate.
Absolutely.
Last counterculture. I asked you to watch The Windsors. Let's all remember this is spoof comedy about the British royals. So I'm assuming you got the chance to do so.
Oh my gosh, Jessica, I totally did. And I have not been able to stop laughing. Oh my God, they have portrayed these people kind of truthfully well. I hate to say it, but they are hilarious. Oh my gosh. So far, honestly, my favorite 2 are the sisters. Who are they again? I think their mom is Fergie. They call her Fergie. Sarah.
Eugenie and Beatrice.
Yeah, okay. They're princesses, technically, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Well, they are hilarious, and they kind of remind me of the show that they did of Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie.
Oh, what was it? They're just Simple Life. Yes.
The Simple Life.
That's exactly who they are.
Oh my God, what a bunch of airheads. I love them. Oh my God, we have to get a job. We have no more money. We have to do that. They are they remind me of the Valley Girls off of White Chicks, that movie, White Chicks. Oh my God, Brittany, I can't believe you said that.
You're thinking.
You were thinking.
She said it. Exactly.
Oh my gosh. So I kind of love how they portrayed Prince Harry. I have to say, the way they've made him just this dumb, illiterate person is adorable to me, and it's hilarious. I wish I could read.
I think it's probably pretty accurate. I mean, in all reality. So, what do you think about old Pippa?
Gosh, that dirty tramp, man. She is just working her way from one royal to the next, and she is just making that fantastic off.
When the world finally woke up to the fact that I have a fantastic ass. Oh, love it.
God, she kind of reminds me of somebody that we're going to talk about.
Oh, could it be our Mrs. Wallace Simpson?
It is. I feel like the way you were leading me into this story coming up, you kind of gave me the impression she was gonna be in, like I said, a gold digging whore, maybe.
Oh, Bethany, I think that is dead accurate. And in fact, the most common thing you hear about Miss Wallace Simpson in history is she's a gold digging Nazi whore. What makes gold digging whore worse? Nazi.
The word not. She is the winner. Ding, ding,
winner, chicken dinner. And I mean, there is some truth to it, but I don't know that that's necessarily the entirely accurate picture of Miss Simpson. So let's get into it. If anything, I think Wallace was a woman addicted to things she couldn't have or that were exciting. And we all know that person, male or female, do we not?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm thinking of at least two, especially one that we both know in my head that's just like all about that. Either it's about a lifestyle, they're just completely through.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just is who Wallace was, like it or not. And that kind of lifestyle with constantly chasing excitement necessitates money. And Wallace's childhood certainly imparted to her the necessity of money. So let's get into it. She was born Bessie Wallace Warfield in Pennsylvania on June 19th, 1896. At just 5 months old, Wallace's father died of tuberculosis, leaving her mother with nothing. The two were looked after by Wallace's great uncle and her Aunt Bessie Merriman. Wallace and her mother were settled in Baltimore so that Aunt Bessie, Wallace's lifelong confidant, could pay for Wallace to be privately educated in the city. Now, this hand-to-mouth business made Wallace smart and tough, but it also made her insecure as shit. And who could blame her? She had this obsessive need for a safety net always, and the older she got, the more intense that need became. If her upbringing wasn't enough to drive it home, her first marriage certainly was. Eager, like all young girls, to get the hell out of their house, she went on a trip to stay with a cousin in Pensacola, Florida, which different time, I guess, because these days I don't think of Pensacola as an upgrade from pick a place other than like maybe war-torn Syria, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where Wallace is swept off her feet by her first husband, Lieutenant Earl Warfield Spencer Jr., who, turns out, spoiler alert, is a violent alcoholic.
Oh, fun. Just what we needed. Perfect.
Yeah, we've already said Nazi, so I feel like what this story needed was violent alcoholism. We've had gold-digging whore, Nazi, now we've got violent alcoholic. I'm so glad we're starting off on just the right foot.
Girl, we are sprinkling into that already freshly brewed, royally fucked stew that we talked about last week.
Last week, and the recipe,
just that little spice.
The recipe's thickening up. Let's put it that way. So according to Wallace, he would do things like hog tie her to the bed all day to keep her from going out. I mean, and play
Christian Grey.
Right, but not in a fun way.
No red room.
No red room. No Thomas Tallis. Nothing fun about this. And he was just constantly playing like mean, cruel jokes on her. So they separated in 1921, and after some time in Washington and abroad, indulging in an affair or two, which, get a girl, the couple attempted, for whatever reason, to reconcile in July of 1924.
Girl, when you leave, you stay gone.
Right, there's a reason that you left.
Exactly.
So, Wallace sails across the world to Hong Kong, where Spencer was stationed at the time, and they separate again almost immediately.
Okay. She was like, "Oh, I missed you. I loved you. Never mind. I remember now."
Oh, I remember why I got the hell away from you. That's right. So, Wallace roams around China with all these other Navy wives. Supposedly during this time, she had an affair with the future son-in-law Mussolini. And eventually, she meets up with her old friend, Catherine Bigelow, who was now married to a man called Herman Rogers. She stayed with what would become her lifelong friends and supporters for about a year, eventually returning to the States, where she meets Ernest Simpson in December of 1936 at a Christmas party. So, Wallace finalized her divorce in 1937, and Ernest began proceedings shortly after beginning an affair with Wallace. Because he was also married. Isn't that
Of
fun?
course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're just going to assume all these people that are hooking up are married.
Oh, you're exactly right. That is definitely going to be a theme to our story.
Oh, God.
Ernest was, again, it's like we said in part 1. If it happens once or twice, it's an accident. But these people, every single time, without fail. Ernest was financially secure, to be sure, and he seemed the opposite of her first husband. Ernest proposed, and even though she was broke now, most of her savings were wiped out in the 1929 market crash, she hesitated. She consulted with her friends Catherine and Herman, worried she'd maybe misjudged Ernest like her first husband or the men she'd had all these affairs with. But she ultimately consented, marrying Ernest, a naturalized British citizen, and settling together in London as Ernest took control of his father's shipping business. They settled in and were soon entertaining, making the acquaintance of the Viscountess Thelma Furness. It is through this acquaintance that the Simpsons begin to move to the center of Edward's circle.
Oh, she is working her way up that royal rich ladder, isn't she?
Did not take her long. From our book and our source, 17 Carnations, in June 1931, Ernest, in his full dress uniform of a Coldstream Guard, almost burst with pride and excitement as he watched Wallace drop a full curtsy to the king and queen when she was presented at court during a ceremony at Buckingham Palace. As she passed the royal party, she heard the Prince of Wales mutter that all the women looked ghastly because of the lighting. Later, when the prince attended a party held at Thelma's apartment, he complimented Wallace on her gown, only for the sassy American to snap back, "But sir, I thought you said we all look ghastly."
Yes.
Right? I don't want to be on her side, but sometimes I just am. Get it, girl? No one but the king had ever really checked the Prince of Wales before. I'm sure that a witty, snappy reply to him running his mouth was almost refreshing. I mean, that might have been the first real human interaction Edward ever had. Wallace made easy conversation with Edward while still making him feel like the most important person on earth. That, coupled with her intelligence and her ideas, attracted the still adolescent prince like a moth to the flame. I could make a very bad vagina joke, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to pretend like I have a little class. Emphasis on pretend. So in early 1932, he accepted his first invitation to the Simpsons' Bryanston Court home and ends up staying until the early hours of the morning just chatting, like 4 a.m., I think. And from there, he was hardly ever out of that house.
Just chatting.
Bethany, what do you think they talked about? I'll let you know in Edward's own words from the book. As he later recalled of Wallace's skills as a hostess, the talk was witty and crackled with new ideas that were bubbling up furiously in the world of Hitler, Mussolini, Stalin, and the New Deal. Only one of those is acceptable to talk about. And that would be Roosevelt and the New Deal.
Right. I mean, she was definitely everything he was wanting. I mean, she's quick on her feet, smart, funny. Supposedly they were Netflixing and chilling until 4:00 in the morning. That's what they were doing.
Right. That's exactly.
We all know what happens in chat. We all know what chatting means,
especially till 4 a.m. I mean, you get up, it's one of my favorite 30 Rock homes. I mean, Liz, I got up, got dressed, went home, got ready. We know where you were, Jenna. So say what you will about her as the story goes on, but Wallace is one smart cookie. Add that to being lively and funny. Small wonder she was fast becoming the talk of the town. And Edward was far from her only admirer. According to the book, Spanish diplomat Tijer Bermejo acknowledged the breadth of her general knowledge and her ability to draw guests into any conversation. If Edward couldn't make it to Bryanston Court, no matter. He simply had the Simpsons to his weekend retreat, Fort Belvedere. Before long, Wallace was his principal hostess. this already seems like a recipe for disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like Edward was in it before he even knew he was in it himself.
Oh yeah, he's getting caught up in a whirlwind of chasing after one vagina.
Exactly. Ladies, if I can give you any piece of advice, it would be to just simply not care if you want somebody. Put on a low-cut top, pay them 2 seconds of attention, insult them, and then just walk away. They'll come running. I promise. Ugh. After that, you can be a human being, but if you want to get your hooks into them, that's how you do it. So, the Simpsons were constant guests of Edward, especially after his current mistress, Thelma Furness, left to visit friends in New York. It was during this time that Edward set both Thelma and Frida aside. And we'll remember his lover mother, Frida Dudley Ward, from episode 1. Right?
Lover mother.
What did we say? You want a lover in the streets and a mother in the sheets?
Oh God, this still makes me grossed out.
It's too much, right? I can't even look at it too hard.
He's put both his surrogate mother and his mistress aside for Wallace.
And London cannot quit talking about it, girl. Seemed to everyone, Edward only had eyes for Wallace Simpson, which, sidetrack, all anyone says is how unattractive she is. And I mean, she's no Margot Robbie, don't get me wrong, but I find her pretty. Is it just me?
No, I honestly, okay, I love black and white photos, period. They make their skin look just flawless. So, no, I'm sorry, but I think she looks gorgeous.
I think she's beautiful. And we both agree that we're just going to stop smiling in photographs, right?
Absolutely. Hello, it's working for them. Maybe that's why they look so beautiful.
Have you not seen any of my recent photos? Please go look at my Instagram. I've ceased to smile in pictures for that exact reason. I've spent too much time looking at all of these black and white photos. I don't know. Maybe she photographed badly, which, again, is something to which I can relate, thus the quit smiling. And to be honest, when I'm shown a picture of what was supposed to be a 1930s society beauty and a 1930s not that attractive, I really can't tell the difference. Honestly, they all look beautiful to me, and they all look glamorous. And let's be honest, Edward was no prize. You take that crown away from him and the money, no one would have touched him with a 10-foot pole. Okay, so I've sent you some photos of Thelma, who was like a famed society beauty, and Wallace, who is universally acknowledged in history as unattractive. I really don't see the difference. But I have to tell you, like, I've seen her in film, though, and I don't have anything to, like, send you. I encourage everybody to go out. And when I watch films of her, I 100% get what Edward saw. There's something about her, how she moves. Her face is very intelligent. I'd hit that.
About Wallace?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if not traditionally what they considered pretty, she was sexy as hell, man. Like, maybe that's it. Just sexy. She's very, very sexy. To me,
she carries herself. She carries herself in a way that you just can't ignore.
Exactly. Well, like a queen, if you will.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. So it's at this time that Ernest's shipping business begins to finally feel the effects of the market crash. So when he had to miss things to tend to business and couldn't any longer afford for Wallace to make weekend trips and the outfits necessary for royal excursions, Edward was only too happy to fork over the cash.
Of course. Ooh, she got herself a sugar daddy.
The king of sugar daddies. Quite literally.
Yes.
Ernest then goes to America suddenly for business in 1934, which precludes the Simpsons' planned trip with Edward to Biarritz. No matter. Aunt Bessie, from earlier, was sent for as a chaperone. Now, it's on this holiday that they claim to have fallen in love. Ugh.
Ew. Okay.
I know, gross.
Is it like a Hallmark movie?
Yeah, but your aunt's in the next room. So
gross.
Gross. Well, we've already established she has no problem with the mother thing. So Edward
Okay.
began to shower Wallis with insanely expensive gifts and jewels, which her husband, who was struggling to keep his business afloat, had to then pay to insure. And this finally draws the attention of the royal family. King George starts taking steps to keep the Simpsons from Edward, banning them from family and official functions like later the 1935 Silver Jubilee and the Royal Ascot. Little bother, as Ernest was invited to join Edward's lodge. So now Ernest is also moving in high circles too, and his dearest wish was to be made a baron, which odd choice. It's not really a title that's coveted, as it's kind of the bottom of the rung. But, it was still nice of Edward. I'm glad to know that Ernest wasn't just left in the corner of some castle bedroom somewhere chained to a wall in a cock trap, just like getting cuffed 24/7.
Oh, see here, sir. We're friends. And then you lead him back into this padded room and put him back in the cock trap.
Exactly.
You will stay here, sir.
You will stay. So this continued proximity to Edward was furthered by Wallis's understanding that as a divorced American with a Jewish husband, she's never going to make it in traditional establishment circles. Therefore, with the help of a few very interesting friends, we'll meet them in a second, she began to reside over her own court of transatlantic hostesses and notable political figures. And naturally, Wallis and Edward presided over this court of non-traditional characters together. So crazy did Edward's continued actions and associations with the Simpsons seem to the traditional establishment and the court itself. Many started to believe that Edward was being blackmailed by the Simpsons. Queen Mary even suggesting they might be using hypnosis. Right. Now, it's at this point in the story that the spy game begins, Bethany. So Edward and the Simpsons are placed under surveillance. Seems a little crazy, right? To spy on them just because Edward's infatuated with a new mistress.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Like, all because he actually likes one woman. I thought that's what they wanted from him anyway. Be interested in one woman, procreate, do his job.
Well, I mean, she's got a Jewish husband. She's been divorced once already. And I mean, that's fine if you're Meghan Markle, but she'd have to get divorced again. And apparently that's just a line too far for a Windsor. So
they have lines?
Well, you wouldn't know it, and definitely not separate family lines until here pretty recently. So, okay. There are a couple reasons for this surveillance, though.
Okay.
The Simpsons, and thus Edward, were keeping, as I stated before, some interesting company these days, whom we're going to introduce momentarily. I really do promise. Now, it's also at this point, though, we have to talk a little bit more about Edward's state of mind, that our adolescent and obstinate Prince of Wales begins to manifest some really alarming signs of an ideological shift, I believe, resulted from the direct influence of this new company he begins to keep. Now, previously, Edward had viewed monarchy in a similar fashion to that of his grandfather, Edward VII, from the book, who had a taste for fine women, splendid cigars, and political interference. The prince wrote about his reign in favorable terms, describing Edward VII as a king who enjoyed the society of witty gentlemen and beautiful women, who relished foreign travel and the savor of high diplomacy. As the Prince of Wales and future king, Edward constitutionally was supposed to keep his ass out of politics, but Edward was constantly mixing into foreign affairs. He really did abhor the idea of another war, and in his adolescent brain, he could leverage his position societally and politically to influence the powers of the day. In his head, he could make a real difference, which, while noble, is not his job. To be fair, he was more traveled, had met more world leaders, and spoke extensively with the common man, or more extensively with the common man than most politicians of the time. And he thought this meant every idea he ever had should be taken as gospel. What he neglected to understand that was, to serious men, he was an overprivileged, entitled little twat that stomped around screaming for someone to listen to him. He wasn't particularly cultured, lacked nuance, and was remiss as hell in his studies, and he didn't know enough about the full picture to make any kind of assessment. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I can. It's like, this is what I pictured myself doing. I'm having a very intellectual conversation about what I want. But in reality, he's running around stomping his feet saying, somebody listen to me. My idea is really good. Y'all, why aren't you listening to me?
Some of you internet geniuses, make us a meme of this. Because it's like, when you think you're, and you really be like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I know that you know the basic role of the monarchy. We've all watched The Crown.
Oh, hello. Let's take it back. I've watched The Princess Diaries like a million times. Okay, that movie is the best. Okay, don't you dare judge me. Julie Andrews and Anne Hathaway kill that stuff, and I love Princess Diaries too. It goes even further into depth of corrupt laws.
Julie Andrews is a frickin' treasure, and if I hear anybody say otherwise, we will both come at you with everything we've got.
She is a treasure and a beauty, and I will watch anything she's in. I don't care.
She could literally be stabbing me in the chest, and I'd be screaming, "Oh my God, I love you!" Exactly. But here's the thing. We definitely need to stop just really quickly and talk about the actual powers of the monarchy, though, because if you don't know the nitty gritty, our listeners probably don't either. I have to remind myself that I'm the nerd and the freak here. Yes. And that fact, and because I love talking to her, are the reasons that Bethany is here, y'all. She keeps me on track. Okay. Well, let's sidetrack just for a quick moment, and let's actually clear up this mystery. It's going to be essential to the remainder of our narrative, I promise. So, the monarch, a constitutional monarch, is supposed to be like the focus of national identity, unity, pride, and all that jazz. They are supposed to keep their inbred mouths shut and be impartial. They aren't supposed to have any, quote, power, and they're supposed to be merely a symbol, supposed to represent stability, continuity, yada yada.
Family.
Exactly.
Morals. That kind of
tradition.
Stuff. Yeah.
But let's talk about why that is, for lack of a better term, bullshit. The truth is, the monarch is still consulted. They may encourage or discourage actions of elected officials and warn on a decision by the cabinet. The monarch expects to be consulted. The truth is, the prime minister and his cabinet don't blow their nose or wipe their ass without asking if it's okay with Elizabeth Windsor.
Is this okay?
Is this okay? May I do it this way, Your Majesty?
Is it front to back or back to front? Do you care? Sorry. Sorry.
Okay. I'm going to try to get through this now.
Sorry.
Okay, I've got it. I think I've got it. The monarch doesn't officially hold the political power publicly. They do it behind closed doors. There's this idea that they serve as a barrier against the corruptible and constantly changing, but bear in mind, elected officials and politicians. There's supposed to be this concept that exists to essentially guide the whole country. I mean, the right way, as they don't come and go on the whim of the people like maybe an elected official would. The royal website lists the Queen's role as head of nation and no longer just as head of state, which was just opening parliament, closing parliament, that kind of stuff, etc. anymore. The site defines head of nation as the focus for identity, unity, and national pride. Very fascist sounding, that.
Wow.
Now, to me, that's a nice way of saying publicly you have no power and privately you really have all of it. And boy, do they. It is only through the monarch's signature or assent that laws come into existence. But by way of the British Constitution, though it remains outside the actual parameters, they're only supposed to sign or not sign what their ministers ask them to. But the reality is no one can compel a monarch to do anything. Comes with the king or queen kind of territory. So let's say you have a monarch not committed to the Constitution and tradition. What then? The monarch may not have direct political powers listed by the Constitution, but theoretically, the monarch is able to exercise the royal prerogative contrary to the advice of the prime minister or the cabinet. As such, the monarch still possesses the power to close a parliamentary session if they choose, to appoint whomever they wish as prime minister, and even refuse royal assent to a bill. Though, to be fair, it hasn't happened since like 1704, 1705 with Queen Anne. Now, the only real thing that stands between the monarch and doing all of that, Bethany, is precedent. They aren't supposed to meddle, and so far, most haven't. And so that's protected the Constitution all this time. Mm-hmm. We've been pretty lucky in having a group of monarchs that is, adhered to this precedent for so long.
Yeah, I mean, they have the power completely. The Queen especially has all this power. And you just said she can pick her own prime minister. She can pick the cabinet. She basically can say, fuck off to anybody that
if she
didn't agree with.
We wouldn't still call her the Queen, would we?
No, exactly. Like, look, I am the Queen and the crown comes first and I am the crown. So
exactly.
This is what I say goes in the story.
There's some more spice in our soup, Bethany. There's some more spice in our stew. So bear in mind, like we had that original stance on Edward's thoughts on the monarchy. So even his original stance on the role was a dangerous one. But let's look a little bit at an evolving ideology in the context of what we just learned. So in spite of the First World War, the prince, and this is again from 17 Carnations, the prince who spoke German fluently retained an abiding affection for the country where so many of his family lived. Every drop of blood in my veins is German, he once told Diana Mitford, an adoring friend of Hitler. He looked back on the trips he made to Germany as a student with evident pleasure, describing the fatherland as a prosperous, industrious, and agreeable country. It echoes with work and song. He shuddered at the very idea of another European war, had little faith in France, a country he believed to be feeble and degenerate, despised Soviet communists for what they did to his godfather, Tsar Nicholas, and his family, and had a wide-eyed admiration for Hitler's efforts, particularly the vigor the National Socialists had shown in providing work and housing for the common man, a cause close to his heart. Also, he consistently saw the bigger menace to peace and security to emanate from Russia rather than Germany, and strongly believed that the winner of any conflict between Britain and Germany would end up being the Soviets.
Huh.
Yeah, isn't that fun? Now, we're going to go just a little bit more from the book. Now, while his previous view included a vision of himself shaping foreign policy, imagine the alarm within the establishment at his evolving worldview. 17 Carnations lurking in the back of his emerging ideology was an authoritarian streak, a flirtation with the idea of a dictator king. It's difficult to assess how seriously he took the concept, but others independently duly noted the prince's predilections. The influential Rothmere journalist and editor Colin Brooks jotted in his diary, the suggestion has been made in many quarters that he could, if he wished, make himself dictator of the empire. Interestingly, Chips Cannon used similar language to describe the prince's shifting political stance, observing that Edward was going the dictator way and is pro-German. I shouldn't be surprised if he aimed at making himself a mild dictator, a difficult enough task for an English king.
Whoa. I'm sorry. I mean, it's one thing to be in the actual monarchy system, but it's another to use it and become a dictator like Hitler. And it's something in its own realm. And he really seems to be like idolizing Hitler and what he stands for. I mean, talk about being impressionable.
Oh, yes. Now, those people I was promising to let us all meet that were responsible maybe for this idea shift, let's talk a bit about why he may be developing this idolization of Hitler. Okay, so we've gone back to Edward Wallace and his new set of transatlantic crazies goose-stepping their way through drawing rooms in heels. Coincidentally, the Simpsons weren't the only people under surveillance in their little apartment block. A neighbor of Wallace, and invaluable to Wallace's social rise, Princess Stephanie von Hohenlohe-Waldenburg-Schillingsfürst, a member of the royal family of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
I'm sorry. All I see is Hohenlohe, Waldenburg, Schillingsfürst.
That's why I'm laughing.
That's what I see.
Bethany, because I knew when you started laughing, and after I said it, that's exactly, you were like, yeah, that's not how you say that, but
sure, we'll go with
we're going to go with your German and Austrian pronunciation, whatever. So here's the thing about Princess Stephanie. Coincidentally, she was Jewish, which naturally Hitler didn't know until, much, much later.
Joke's on him.
Joke's on you, buddy. And boy, did she have direct access to Hitler. She was charming and endlessly connected in the highest of social circles. As the book puts it, the queen of the exclusive group of well-heeled go-betweens, these royals, aristocrats, and influential businessmen who were the first line of discreet contact between war-weary nations. So what do we think about Miss Stephanie so far?
That's interesting. For her to be Jewish, but yet being almost like Hitler's not right-hand man, because like a right-hand man.
Yeah. I mean, she's
in his pocket, under the table. This girl is under the table.
She's his key to Britain. Yeah.
Which is so crazy. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So several countries had skin in the Continental Propaganda War spy game, but Princess Stephanie took her directives from Hitler, who, surprise, surprise, was a man with a plan. Hitler tasked the Princess Stephanie with ingraining herself into the lives of the highborn, insanely wealthy, the political leaders of the time. Her job was to assume the wealthy and powerful and kind of assume them into her group and then assure them that Hitler had peaceful intentions. Sure he did. She was constantly pointing out to people in power that the Treaty of Versailles was a less than useless shit rag, which on this one point, I do agree with them all. But here's where it gets problematic, however, as Hitler wanted, quote, his dear princess to put out there that Germany should be allowed to revert to her original and natural borders, those that existed before the end of the war and their subsequent loss due to the terms of the treaty. More frightening still, Princess Stephanie was doing her damnedest to convince important people in the highest circles of British society that Germany should be completely free to rebuild her military without sanctions or restrictions, which, as we now know, was a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
And as the princess pranced through one salon after the other, she also made the argument that a strong Germany was a barrier against those scary Soviet communists, which, if you're super rich, as all people in power are, there's nothing scarier than communism, because you sure as shit are not going to give it all up to the workers you've been exploiting for centuries.
Yeah, of course not.
They would rather shake the hand of the devil himself, which in this case was Adolf Hitler. Coincidence? I think not. So, 17 Carnations explains it best. Hitler and his henchmen were prepared to use every means possible to bend international opinion to favor Nazi demands. He convinced German royals and industrialists to go forth and multiply his word. Further on, when Hitler stumbled in his plan for Edward to marry a young German princess, we remember that from part 1, he came to depend on Princess Stephanie to deliver a pro-German sovereign to the throne. And then finally, the New York Mirror describes how she exerted her influence in London. Her apartment has become the focus for those British aristocrats who have a friendly stance towards Nazi Germany. Her soirees are the talk of the town. Prominently displayed in her drawing room is a huge portrait of Hitler. Can you imagine, Bethany, going to a fancy dinner party, you're enjoying your cocktails, you go into the dining room, and there is a nice big portrait of fucking Adolf Hitler.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Fuck that. It would be like, no. It'd be like on final day when you go to take your final and you're rushing, you get in there and you look around and be like, I don't think I'm in the right class. What class is this? I don't remember signing up for joining the Nazi regime. Like, what's happening right now?
Wait a minute. Why am I literally taking a test on like advanced Nazi Germany? I'm supposed to be taking a class on Japanese history. And I can relate to that because that has happened. You're exactly right. That's that feeling like your stomach falls out of your, like, everything. Like, oh, God, what have I done?
God.
That is walking into a dining room and having a full-length portrait of Adolf Hitler facing you. God. So, Wallace and their set lived to keep Edward entertained. While Princess Stephanie aided Wallace through use of her little black book, the primary venue was provided by Wallace's other new BFF, Lady Emerald Cunard. Emerald was an exciting woman, much like Wallace and Princess Stephanie, but unlike those two hoes, she knew how to throw a party, like a Gatsby-style party.
Yes.
She was American and was...
Of course she was, yes.
Bitch knows how to party. Of course she was. And she was very well-versed in culture. She loved everything from opera to poetry, and she was very lively, very clever. She would make a game of pushing politicians, diplomats, and notables of the day into embarrassing indiscretions. Now, maybe there was a little truth to the blackmail charge, but just not blackmailing Edward. David Lloyd George described her as the most dangerous woman in London. Some came for her talk, others came for her booze. She never didn't have a bottle tapped, let's put it that way. Which, if she wasn't such an admirer of Hitler, sounds like my kind of girl.
Right. Which is interesting for her to be American and be siding with Hitler. And wait, how in the world did she become friends with Wallace? And I'm curious of what is in Princess Stephanie's little black book of contacts.
Okay.
Something feels a little fishy right now. Like it's like the three Hitler's angels.
Like Hitler's angels, I could see them all striking, but they're not smiling and very, very porcelain skinned.
Yes. And instead of guns, they have booze.
Booze and fancy clothes. Oh, Bethany, that is great. Oh, I love it. Hitler's angels. Oh, now I'm going to have to Lamaze breathe so I can keep going, man. The outline starts to blur because I'm wiping tears out of my eyes. I'm laughing so hard right now. Woo! Okay. If every party you go to at Lady Cunard's is better than the next, no wonder no one ever turned her down if she sent an invitation. And her Hitler love was, quite frankly, far from unusual in the circles of the ruling elite. Again, anything to the super rich is better than communism. So it's easy for these rich assholes to believe Hitler was all peace and love and respect. They saw his rule and his government as a source of stability that emphasized youth and job creation. So when the book tells us Emerald was conservative and subscribed to the mainstream view that Hitler was a good thing for Germany, such was her enthusiasm for the Nazi cause, the American ambassador to London, Robert Worth Bingham, described the Cunard set as the pro-German cabal. It's really not all that, shocking. Considered that that's just the way the elite saw it, as a buffer to the Soviets. Now, her views, they just didn't differ from everybody in her social set. So, in June 1935, Lady Cunard hosts a dinner with her BFFs Wallace and Princess Stephanie. One more time, let's not forget the Jew who loved Hitler, Princess Stephanie, in honor of who else but Hitler's special envoy to Britain, Joachim von Ribbentrop. So Princess Stephanie, via Hitler, wants von Ribbentrop there to make the acquaintance of Edward, who will go wherever Wallace goes. Emerald Cunard, who had a thing for von Ribbentrop, was only too happy to host a party for him. Now, back in 1934, the German ambassador Leopold von Hesch held a dinner in which Wallace and Edward first became acquainted with von Ribbentrop. He wasn't exactly new to their circle. Now, remember, a lot of the information we have, both the historians and the documentary makers, about this entire period of history comes from declassified FBI files. Why our allies and citizens are suddenly sidetracked, why they're suddenly shocked the American government is spying on them always baffles me. We've been doing it a very long time. Hoover
Really
perfected it a long time ago. Like, people are afraid of globalism. It already happened a century ago. Guys, this is why history is so important. That way you spend your time pissed off about the things you can still do something about.
Exactly.
Right? We can still do things. Now, back to our FBI files. And spoiler alert, we are about to enter the world of hearsay now. Allegedly, after von Ribbentrop and Wallace's initial meeting, and while she was married and very much the sole object of Edward's affections, she and von Ribbentrop began an affair.
Oh, God, of course. He loves her and she doesn't love him, but she wants to sleep around with that guy, and that girl's in love with him, but she doesn't care because she's friends with the girl that is sleeping with the guy that she likes.
Oh, yeah.
Holy smokes. Talk about high school drama.
Yeah. So, let's get the hot goss straight from the book and the files themselves. Now, at some point, he, meaning von Ribbentrop, asked Constance Spry, the famed florist and friend of Wallace, to make up a spray of flowers every day, which were to be delivered to her central London apartment. The secret soon leaked out, and first began the talk of the German embassy in London, and then of the German chancellery in Berlin. Ambassador von Isch was unable to discover the significance of the number 17 and thought it was just the way of the businessman. The Prince of Wales' cousin, the Duke Karl Alexander von Württemberg, who was on good terms with his aunt, Queen Mary, other royals, and senior British politicians, has another explanation. The Duke, who became a Benedictine monk known as Father Odo and an opponent of the Nazis, would later tell FBI agents that von Ribbentrop was Wallace's lover and that the number 17 represented the occasions. You already know it.
They slept together. He had a list.
He had a list. Just like the rest of us.
We all have made a list, okay?
Exactly. So, he further, meaning Father Odo, further related a scurrilous story suggesting that the prince was impotent and only the skills of Miss Simpson could satisfactorily gratify the Duke's, Edward's, sexual desires.
Well, that explains his fascination with her. I mean, if she's the only one that can get him to finish, then of course he's gonna keep her around. Like,
right?
Ladies, if you find your talent, get yourself a talent, okay? Get yourself a talent.
Oh, and hers was apparently like suck starting a lawnmower, man. A hurricane can't blow as hard as Wallace Simpson.
She got it on the first yank.
She just looked at it. Now, there are a couple other sources that kind of confirm this information, but the truth is we'll just never actually know. It is mostly hot goss. We can't prove it one way or the other definitively. Now, regardless, getting close to Wallace Simpson, especially if she's the only person living that can get the future king of England to, well, give him his jollies, if we will, was a smart move by von Ribbentrop. Hitler had tasked Princess Stephanie with getting von Ribbentrop and Edward together as much as possible. And Hitler had tasked von Ribbentrop with making sure once Edward's ass hit the British throne, he was feeling very German-friendly, which in all fairness wasn't going to be too terribly hard. You know, he spoke German as comfortably as he spoke English, and he missed dearly his family and a country that were as much a part of him in his mind as his English family and his home in England. So here we are, 1935. We're going to get back to what you were saying. Lady Emerald Cunard has a mega crush on von Ribbentrop, throws a party in his honor, making sure her BFF Wallace is invited so that she can be in love with von Ribbentrop vicariously through Wallace. And everywhere that Wallace goes, and whatever the truth of her relationship with von Ribbentrop, Wallace did very much enjoy his company. Edward is sure to follow. Lady Emerald allows she and Wallace's other BFF, Princess Stephanie, who has done extensive research on what Edward likes, to essentially design this party in a way that's meant to put Edward at his greatest ease, despite the party supposedly being for von Ribbentrop. It's at this party that von Ribbentrop was to plant the seed of what was to be Hitler's first big propaganda ploy in Britain. Now, if that all sounded like a bunch of high school bullshit, it's because it is. It's Riverdale for Nazis, Bethany. It's like Nazis took risk and decided to LARP with it.
Right. Exactly. All a bunch of nerds.
They were G&G-ing. They really were. They really were.
What you're going to tell me is they're going to bust out that jingle jangle. And
bust out that jingle jangle.
What were the rocks? The pop rocks?
Whatever those were called. I can't think of the name of it right now. Darn it. Well, if anybody was ever a gargoyle king, it's frickin' Hitler, right?
Yeah. He's been playing forever.
Yeah. He'd been at it for quite a long time. Now, before this party, Edward had been more than primed to be the perfect player in Hitler's propaganda game. Since frequenting Lady Cunard and Princess Stephanie's salons and spending evenings at dinners with the Simpsons, Edward had befriended Sir Oswald Mosley, leader of the British Union of Fascists and Insane Monarchists. Mosley often used Edward's name to garner support and cash for the cause. Edward often spent time with Mosley's gang. His own equerry, Fruity Metcalf, was married to Lady Alexandra Curzon. Curzon's sister, Lady Cynthia, was married to Mosley, and both couples were members of something called the January Club. Again, the nerd thing with the clubs and the bullshit. My God.
Yeah.
Oy. The January Club was created by Mosley for the richest of the rich to get together and try to persuade establishment figures to join the fascist party. It's a documented matter of record that Edward attended at least one public dinner held by the club. And just 2 months after this dinner, the January Club changed its name to the Windsor Club.
Whoa. So, wow. And just all it took was one public meeting, and 2 months later, they change it. That's insane. And okay, so what's getting me is like all these parties are going on, and all these you can't sit with us clubs are going on. You know, aren't the Jews have already started to flee and tell people about like what's going on, right? That's happening, right?
Oh, yeah. There are some warning signs, and there are alarm bells sounding all over Europe. So yes, but most of the aristocracy just dismissed it. I mean, the truth is it's ugly, but in most of the rich households of Britain, they were still being swayed by a lot of the ideas put forth by something called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion.
I'm sorry. Did you just say Zion? What are we doing? Are we talking about the rule book for the space station for that movie Xenon, the girl of the 21st century? No. We must consult the Book of Zion. Like, what the hell? What the heck is happening? I didn't know we were talking about a Disney movie. Oh my God.
Oh, Bethany. You just took me so hard back to my childhood. I absolutely love it.
Okay. Dude, I love that movie.
It just all came back to me in like an instant flash. I 100% remember it. But the problem is now I'm going to have to try to read through this kind of serious thing. And I'm really wanting to stop and laugh again. Oh my God.
Okay, so tell me, what is the Elders of Zion? Is it some alien book?
I wish it was, Bethany. It would be better if it was. No, the Elders of Zion was a super offensive, disgustingly anti-Semitic, completely fabricated piece of trash book that came out of Russia. And I'm not exactly sure, so please don't hold me to this and nobody correct me because this is from my memory, sometime between 1900 and 1905. if my memory serves correct. It's basically the fake, like, minutes of a meeting of Jewish leaders to basically run the world with a secret Jewish cabal, which only insane record keepers like the Nazis would think most secret meeting of Jewish leaders in the world ever. That would definitely have a set of minutes. Only Nazis would observe the rules of parliamentary procedure at a secret rule the world meeting. Nerds. That's all they were, guys. Nerds. So the elders of Zion.
You mean the elders of Xenon?
Oh, God, you got to quit saying it. The elders of Zion was internationally printed and widely disseminated. Like, everywhere. Here's a piece of trivia for you. Famed American and no Nazi piece of shit, and it's not alleged either, save your emails, fuck off, Henry Ford was actually, he paid out of his own pocket to have hundreds and thousands of copies of the Elders printed and distributed in the States in the 1920s. Here, I've sent you a picture of it.
Wait, did you say Henry Ford?
Oh, yes, of Ford Motor Company.
That is a picture of Henry Ford with the car. Yeah.
Yeah, that's him receiving, just so we all know, the Grand Cross of the German Eagle from Nazi officials. See,
wow.
Britain? See, it's not just you guys. We're going to get to our own historical pieces of shit that may be responsible for the death of thousands. Don't you worry about it. We're going to get there. We just give our turds a lot of money, though. We don't also put crowns on them. Your piece of shit was therefore just more interesting, guys. I'm sorry. That's why we went for him first.
You decided to put your piece of shit on a pedestal, so we're going to make fun of it.
So we're going to make fun of it. Yeah. So this Elders of Zion shit is knocking around the world yet again alongside Hitler's Mein Kampf. And Edward was most certainly anti-Semitic, like most people of that social class. More fun trivia, Bethany. Buckingham Palace did not employ Jews or Catholics in any prominent positions in the royal household until well into the current queen's reign. Oh, now the royal wedding doesn't seem so fun, does it?
No. Mm-mm.
I mean, there's no evidence that, like, Edward ever slow clapped for concentration camps, but he certainly wasn't gonna, like, do anything about it, even if it was true. The grandson of the Kaiser, you know, King George V's cousin and the main instigator of World War I, and at this point, exiled Kaiser Wilhelm II, his grandson, Prince Louis Ferdinand, came to stay in England in the summer of 1933 as a guest of diplomat Sir Robert Bruce Lockhart. Edward was eager to see his relation again, and Prince Louis and Lockhart were thus invited to Edward's London home, St. James Palace. Edward wanted to discuss current affairs, and I think we absolutely have to go to the book and let Sir Robert Bruce Lockhart tell us what happened in his own words. In his diary entry the following day, Bruce Lockhart recorded, "The Prince of Wales was quite pro-Hitler and said it was no business of ours to interfere in Germany's internal affairs, either re Jews or re anything else, and added that dictators are very popular these days, and we might want one in England before long." When the exiled Kaiser wrote to Bruce Lockhart, thanking him for arranging the meeting, he expressed the hope that it would further German and English relations. The remark of the Prince of Wales, "We have a right to deal with our own affairs as we deem it right," shows sound judgment. And Prince Louis Ferdinand would no doubt have agreed with him on this point.
Oh my God.
Right?
My God.
You can't even say anything. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So here we are at this party. Edward's prime for von Ribbentrop to swoop in. Everything in part one, when we were talking about propaganda wars, how the Allies may have won World War I, but lost the subsequent propaganda war. This meeting was about to result in one of Hitler's first big propaganda wins thanks to Edward. And it was certainly not be the last time in our story. After some talk about the good old fatherland, von Ribbentrop and Edward start brainstorming ideas about increasing amity between Britain and Germany. Von Ribbentrop pitches this idea about uniting World War I servicemen from both countries, the idea being a sort of exchange visit to heal wounds left by the war. And boy, did Edward jump on this idea. He made a speech for ex-servicemen at the British Legion, and Bethany, best ventriloquist act the world has ever seen. Jeff Dunham's racist puppet act can suck it, because von Ribbentrop's racist puppet act was like the tits. Von Ribbentrop's hand was up in Edward's ass, and his words were just coming out of Edward's mouth, and von Ribbentrop wasn't even in the room.
Oh, God. Of course he wasn't.
Well, of course he wasn't. And, of course, Edward claimed the speech was the idea of the British Legion's chairman, but it's pretty well documented this was a von Ribbentrop brainchild. Edward ended saying from the book, "I feel there would be no more suitable body of men to stretch forth the hand of friendship to Germans than we ex-servicemen." Now, Germany wasted no time in taking up the torch, praising Edward, and the first delegation was underway. And when the British ex-servicemen arrived, instead of being received as a former foe, the Germans really rolled out the red carpet. I mean, they're known for being detailed, and they didn't miss a trick. These men arrived to parades and enthusiastic reception from every single German they met. They were made to feel as if they themselves were royalty. And the Germans carefully constructed every moment of the trip, making sure to paint Nazi Germany and all her disgusting policies in the very best light. So now let's all be horrified from the book. There were, according to one witness, even taken to a concentration camp at Dachau, during which time the well-fed guards took the place of the inmates who were herded below ground. It was a prelude to many other visits, one headed by the prince's German cousin and ardent Nazi, Karl Eduard, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. We'll all remember that fun name. The scheme, according to von Ribbentrop's biographer, Dr. Paul Schwartz, proved to be one of the cleverest and cheapest ways to make friends for Nazi Germany in peace-loving, conciliatory Britain.
Wow. I mean, you got to hand it to them. I mean, they are real illusionists. I mean, crafty.
Again, they just were playing Dungeons and Dragons and took it to the world. They were the world's greatest LARPers.
Yep. The first ever global LARPers.
Now, once the palace and the old guard establishment and politicians were made aware of this, Edward was told to get his ass back to Buckingham Palace ASAP. Get back here now. Where his father, King George V, summarily tore into his idiot son. The book, "How often have I told you, my dear boy?" the king asked him. "Never mix in politics, especially where foreign affairs are concerned." Not only had he handed the Nazi regime a propaganda coup, but he had irritated the French and effected very sensitive negotiations regarding Anglo-German naval treaties. Now, moving on in the book, for his part, Edward was angry that a non-political goodwill gesture had been grievously misinterpreted. It seemed to settle nothing. British foreign policy seemed paralyzed, he concluded, the episode reinforcing his growing belief that what he said and what he did could transform official thinking. Now, that being said, Edward wasn't smart enough to realize the subtle propaganda war going on around him. Of course not. He saw himself as this great influencer of policy. He couldn't grasp that sending delegations back and forth in this way was essentially giving the entire world the impression of an equal partnership existing between Victor Britain and vanquished Germany, which massively undermined the financial and military impositions and reparations of the Treaty of Versailles. Edward gets back to the palace expecting to have all the medals and commendations Britain has to offer showered upon him, and instead he finds a very pissed off daddy and prime minister. Now, instead of taking the time to consider why the hell they were so furious and checking himself, instead, and I have to share this because I laughed so hard imagining this, he did this to the book. Shortly after Edward returned from Buckingham Palace, Wallace's cousin, who was staying at Bryanston Court, reported that the prince was wearing a German helmet and goose-stepping around the living room for what reason I cannot imagine.
Goose stepping. It's like watching a grown man have a child temper tantrum.
That's exactly what it is. What a little twat. So as if getting drunk and being an idiot is... It's definitely an adolescent reaction to getting yelled at by your parents. And if anything, we've established in the first episode, Edward never made it past that stage. But despite the dislike of his sons mixing in, George V didn't relish the idea of another war either. And he did nothing to confront Mussolini over the invasion of Abyssinia, later to be known as Ethiopia, and Italy's growing fascist aggression. When Anthony Eden, his foreign secretary in 1935, King George emphasized he not disturb the growing good relations with Germany, which you can argue is mixing in.
Yeah.
Which is what he would get pissed at Edward about. I mean...
Yeah, practice what you preach.
Exactly. Okay. Nor did he stop the Germans scoring some major propaganda points either, albeit the approach they used with the king had to be much more clever than the one they used with Edward, understandably. Now, remember that propaganda underscore of equal footing between victor and vanquished? Yeah. Well, the King's Silver Jubilee, which is a celebration of biblical origin, denoting like a milestone number of years in a monarch's reign, which in this case is 25. And we've heard of the Silver Jubilee, the silver, the ass-licking Jubilee, all the ones that they have over there. So this brings a number of rather interesting visitors to Britain's shores not seen since the First World War. Fence mending between the newly minted House of Windsor and the royal houses of Germany, you know, the Windsor's family, namely the Saxe-Coburg-Gothas, began organically in preparation for the Jubilee. Now, to King George and the majority of the royal family, it was finally a chance to remove that family barrier necessitated by World War I. But let's think of it this way, Bethany. You know how close you are with your aunt, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, imagine that aunt is a German duchess, and on the other side, imagine you're a British one. But a world war is fought in which your country is on one side and your aunt's is on the other. Doesn't change how you feel about your aunt, but it...
You just can't see her.
Yeah.
You just can't be out in public with her.
It absolutely means you can't be associated with each other because you're involved in the governance of your respective countries. And the Treaty of Versailles sort of prolongs this separation at the end of the conflict. So the Jubilee was an occasion, if you're George V, that Jubilee is an occasion for that aunt to then come and visit and celebrate you, you know, drawing a line between past and future. And that's innocuous enough on its face, but the Nazis used it to send a very different message to the world.
Of course they did.
Of course they did. Now, while it was judged as still too soon for the Kaiser himself to come celebrate with his cousin George V, never fear, to the book, he, the Kaiser's daughter-in-law, Crown Prince Cecile, her daughter Victoria, and Hitler's favorite royal, Karl Eduard, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, did attend the celebrations, while Ambassador von Esch hosted an elaborate party at the Carlton House Terrace Embassy for his friends, the Prince of Wales and Mrs. Simpson.
Yep. Knew she'd be there. Of course she'd be there.
Of course she would. Now, you know, to honor the occasion, she would be there. They'd have all this. Plus, they've got all these. I mean, you're just handing Hitler a win. So slowly but surely, an invasion of German nobility to British soil began. And that was completely by Hitler's design. In Germany, Hitler had recruited many of the German aristocracy, eager to keep their wealth and position to his cause. This gave the everyday German man the belief that if the old guard was all in with the new order, it must be on the level. And Hitler did the same thing using these German royals across Europe. European leaders and royals on the fence were being convinced everything in the fatherland was like 100. Honorary cultural attachés were appointed to the German embassy in Britain, and not surprisingly, each was a close family member of the Windsors. For example, good friend and cousin of Edward's, Prince George, Duke of Kent, and the Mountbatten clan, Prince Ludwig von Hesse-Darmstadt, was appointed only after replacing Edward's other cousin and friend Otto Christian von Bismarck. They all had express orders to report all rumors from the palace and report on the state of King George's health. Like it or not, King George rather unwittingly aided his son in furthering the ally loss of the propaganda war. Let's run really, really quickly to 17 Carnations. As historian John Costello pithily observed, not since the balmy days before World War I had so many of the leading names in the Almanac de Gotha appeared together at the London dinner tables. The Duchess of Brunswick, daughter of exiled Kaiser, the Prince and Princess von Bismarck, and a slew of counts and barons sipped champagne with emissaries from Berlin. The Nazi leaders were quick to seize the initiative and exploit the fascination of London society for aristocratic fascism. The Prince of Wales and his younger brother, Prince George, were very amiable recipients of Nazi hostility and largesse, enjoying the dinners and the conversation at the German embassy and elsewhere. Edward's brother, Duke of York, was more cynical about the motivation behind his Nazi courtship. He would later tell Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King, "My own family relations in Germany have been used to spy and get particulars from other members of my family." Really quickly, for those that don't know, that Duke of York is Elizabeth Windsor's father, who at the time was the Duke of York, later became George VI. Okay. If that makes a little more sense.
Yes.
So, after the Jubilee, this transatlantic contact was far from over. Anglo-German relations were at pre-World War I levels, and Edward, currently Prince of Wales, was out of control. Then, in January of 1936, George V dies, his ill health and the stresses of the Jubilee finally taking their toll. Yeah. So across the Atlantic, Hitler refused his usual evening entertainment of Disney cartoons. And again, Britain, we're not just getting at you. We have plenty of our own anti-Semitic Nazi pieces of shit, starting right there with Walt Disney, to watch instead a newsreel featuring footage of King George's funeral. He watched the newly crowned King Edward VIII conduct himself throughout the proceedings, but he also noted the presence of Wallis Simpson, a woman who Hitler knew had not only mesmerized the new king, but who had very least caught the attention of his highly devoted commissioner, Herr von Ribbentrop. The Prince of Wales is now officially King Edward VIII of the United Kingdom. And that, guys, is where we end part 2 of the body count of Edward VIII. So
way to end it.
I know. Next time we're going to get into, at very least, everything from basically Edward being responsible for appeasement in Europe, maybe helping Hitler invade the Ardennes, or at least go to it too. We're going to get to something called Operation Willie, and I'm going to leave it at that. So everybody can start Googling before. Now, we are crunched on time, and normally Bethany and I would do our own separate counterculture, but I think we could both agree on one thing we would both like to plug. Page 7, right?
Page 7. Molly and Jackie are so, I love them. They are so funny.
Tears. I've never laughed so hard at two women in my entire life. They are wonderful. I love them so much. Like, they are great. Too. if nothing else, they at least talk as loudly as you and I do. So
I find myself in listening to them, really.
But guys, if you love celebrity, as they put it, hot goss, and if you love Riverdale as much as we do, please go listen to page 7. It's absolutely fantastic. Cracks us both up. Real quick, please subscribe, rate, and review, guys. I can't tell you how much it helps us on the business end. We love to feel good about ourselves, and we'd love to hear if you love the show, but it's not to stroke our ego. We promise. It is to help us out, to help us get out there so that we can put out even more content for you guys.
Yeah. And give us a suggestion too, that we're always open to hearing what you guys want to talk about. What's crippling your anxiety in history? Like what would you like to talk about?
Exactly. So if you don't even want to say anything to us in that, just throw your suggestions in the review box. We will be looking, we promise. Also, as far as suggestions, we do this for you guys. We want you guys to get all that rage, terror, anxiety, all that out with us. So, please hit us up on social media, hit us up on our website. We want to hear what you guys want to hear about. Absolutely. Exactly. So, let me go ahead and plug the show stuff. It's going to be at bodycountpod.net. We are at bodycountpod on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Well, I guess not an @ on Facebook. We are just Body Count Pod on Facebook. I don't have a Facebook, so I'm not super well versed in how it works. And then Bethany, where can people find you?
I am on Facebook, Bethany Rose Skelton, and search me in there. And then on Instagram, I'm Bethany RN24.
And that's Skelton?
Not skeleton, as people like to call me.
Exactly. Skeleton. And then I am at Jessica, spelled the normal way, B as in boy, Manor, MANOR, like the house, not the behavior, at Jessica B. Manor on both Instagram and on Twitter. And I think that gets everything we need this week. How about you, Bethany?
Yeah, it's perfect. Absolutely.
All right. Well, everybody come back. Join us next week for the 3rd and final installment of the theoretical body count of Edward VIII.
Yes.
We freaking love you guys. Bye.
We love you. Bye.